Hello friends, welcome to the Eerie Fairy Tales and day number 3 of my 12 Days of Christmas series. And today I have a very fun video planned. This is one of my favorite videos to watch, so it was fun to make one myself. And I did a little bit of research here. I have 35 books to share with you. I have different genres: horror, sci-fi, thriller, fantasy, and a little bit of mystery, historical fiction, and folklore mixed in there as well. So hopefully there will be something here for everyone. I will mention whether I've read from the author before or read in the series, because some of these are part of a series, so I'll make sure to mention that. So let's get into the books. Okay, so getting into my anticipated releases for 2024, I will go ahead and go in order of publication date. These may change as the dates come closer, so you'll want to keep your eye out for that. And we'll go ahead and start out with January, January 9th. And we have 2 that are releasing on that date. The first one is Somewhere in the Deep by Tanvi Burwa. This is an Asian-inspired YA fantasy. 17-year-old Crescent Dune is buried under the weight of her dead parents' debt and the ruinous legacy they left behind. The only way she can earn enough money to escape her unforgiving island is by battling monstrous creatures in an underground fighting pit. That sounds really fun. I love a good adventure fantasy story. It does remind me a little bit of the other book I read by her, Monsters Born and Made, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Oh, and I did read Monsters Born and Made in July, so that was in my wrap-up. I'll go ahead and link that below just in case you missed it. Okay, and the second one that I'm interested in that is releasing on January 9th is The Jinn Waits 100 Years by Shabnam Khan. In this we have Akbar Manzo was once a grand estate off the coast of South Africa. Now, nearly a century since it was built, it stands in ruins, an isolated boarding house for misfits, seeking to forget their past and disappear into the mansion's dark corridors. That sounds so good and a little creepy. And I think I forgot to mention the genre. It's a blend of a mystery, historical fiction, and dark fairy tale. And the next one we have releasing in January on the 16th is This Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer. And this is a horror. 4 ambitious climbers hike into the Kentucky wilderness. 7 months later, 3 mangled bodies are discovered. Were their deaths simple accidents or the result of something sinister? And this one is inspired by the Dyatlov Pass mystery, so I am very interested to check that out. That has always been an intriguing true story to me. I have different theories on what I think happened, but it'll be fun to read this story that was inspired by that. Next up on January 18th, we have Feybound by Sarah El Arifi, and this is fantasy. And this has fairies and elves, so you know I'm gonna love that. 2 elven sisters become imprisoned in the intoxicating world of the Fae, where danger and love lie in wait. Feybound is the first book in an enchanting new trilogy from the Sunday Times best-selling author of The Final Strife. I haven't read The Final Strife, but heads up, it is going to be a trilogy. Next release in January is going to be on the 23rd, and that is Exordia by Seth Dickinson. This is a sci-fi with a little bit of horror elements, I believe. In this we have Shrin, I'm not sure on the pronunciation, and Anna are inexorably, dangerously drawn to each other, and their contact reveals universe-threatening stakes. While humanity reels from disaster, Anna must join a small team of civilians, soldiers, and scientists to investigate a mysterious broadcast and unknowable horror. Okay, it's warming up a little bit in here with these lights, so I took my jacket off. Next up, we have the last one releasing in January. That's going to be on the 30th. And we have Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona, and this is a thriller. A suspenseful and entertaining debut thriller, a love letter to vintage horror movies, in which a teenager must overcome her own anxiety to protect the 2 children she's babysitting when strangers come knocking at the door. Ooh, that sounds anxiety-inducing because that's one of my triggers. I don't know what it is. I cannot stand it when people knock on the door. If I'm not expecting you, don't knock on my door. I won't answer. Oh, and real quick before we get on to the next anticipated release, I did hear in this one that the main character uses watching horror movies as a way to help her anxiety. And I think those of us who are horror fans can relate to that. So let me know if you're going to add this to your TBR. So next up, we have 4 releases on February 6th. The first one is Infinity Alchemist, and this is by Kaysen Calendar. This is a YA fantasy. It's a spellbinding fantasy novel about a quest that leads 3 young alchemists towards dangerous truth, legendary love, and extraordinary power. In this, we follow a young man learning alchemy in secret because it's illegal for him to practice it without a license. And that cover is just so cool. And next one releasing on February 6th is Your Shadow Half Remains by Sunny Moraine. This is a horror thriller in a post-apocalyptic setting. This one has been compared to The Last of Us meets Bird Box. In this, we have eye contact that causes people to spiral into a deadly violent rage. One look can kill. Riley has not seen a single human face in longer than she can reckon. And another cool cover. And next one on February 6th is Among the Living by Tim Leben, and this is a horror thriller. I believe this one is set in the Arctic. In this, we have Bethan and her friends, who are environmental activists determined to protect the land. But Dean's group's exploitation of rare earth minerals deep in the caves unleashes a horrific contagion that has rested frozen and undisturbed for many millennia. Ooh, that sounds good. Last one on February 6th is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and this is going to be part of a series. This is the first book, and that cover is stunning. Oh my god, I love it so much. And this is a murder mystery high fantasy, so that's a cool combo. In this, we have an eccentric detective and investigator whose reputation for brilliance is matched only by her eccentricities, and her long-suffering assistant is an engraver magically altered to possess a perfect memory. And we have 3 releases coming up on February 13th. The first one is What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher, and this is the sequel to What Moves the Dead. I have not read that yet, but I would love to read both of these, hopefully next year. In this one, we follow Easton, who travels to Galatia, I think that's how you would say it, as a favor to Miss Potter. They find their home empty, the caretaker dead, and the grounds troubled by a strange, uncanny silence. And if it wasn't obvious by the cover, this novella is a horror story. Next up on February 13th, we have The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown, and this is fantasy. And in this, we have a bookseller who is given a gift by her favorite customer. It's a book, an unusual book, and by possessing this book, it gives her a special power, basically enables her to turn any door into a portal to wherever she wants to go. So with this book, she can turn any door into every door and go anywhere she wants. So I love a book about books. This sounds really fun. And lastly, on February 13th, we have Gog Magog by Jeff Noon and Steve Beard, and this is a first in a duology. And this is an adventure fantasy story. I love that cover too, that's really cool. And Gog Magog tells the story of an epic journey through the 60-mile-long ghost of a dragon. We travel by boat, a rickety steam launch captained by Katie Mead, a veteran taxi pilot on the River Nisus. In her heyday, she carried people and goods from the thriving seaports of the estuary into Ludwig, the capital city. So it sounds like we're going to have a little bit of a seafaring adventure here, and I love those. Then we have a few releases coming out on February 20th. The first is My Throat an Open Grave by Tori Bovolino, and this has been described as labyrinth meets folk horror, so that's really cool. And in this one, we follow a girl who wishes her baby brother away to the Lord of the Wood, but now must get him back. And she is from Winston, Pennsylvania. She was raised in a town where all girls have to be good and holy. The next one is The Bad Ones by Melissa Albert, and this is a supernatural horror. And this is steeped in dark magic and riddled with a supply of sinister, with plenty of secrets, dangerous folklore, and a string of disappearances. And last one coming out February 20th is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. This is fantasy and the first in a duology. On the streets of White Roaring, Arthi Casimir is a criminal mastermind and collector of secrets. Her prestigious tea room transforms into an illegal bloodhouse by night, catering to the vampires feared by society. And I love a good vampire story, and this sounds pretty unique. And then there's a couple releasing on March 19th that I am interested in. The first one is Cascade Failure by L.M. Saga, and this is a sci-fi adventure. And this is described as a high-octane sci-fi adventure that features a fierce, messy, chaotic space family, vibrant worlds, and an exploration of the many ways to be and not be human. And next up, we have A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. This is historical horror. That cover is gorgeous. And this is a captivating tale of two Victorian gentlemen hiding their relationship away in a botanical garden, who embark on a Frankenstein-style experiment with unexpected consequences. It's an unusual thing to live in a botanical garden, but Simon and Gregor are an unusual pair of gentlemen. Then on March 26th, we have Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne, and this is horror. And this is a beautifully unhinged and deeply satisfying sharp twist on the classic haunted house story, exploring loneliness, belonging, and the seemingly inescapable bonds of family mythology. I like this. It says, "Warning may invoke feelings of irritation, dread, and despair that come with large family gatherings." Then on March 28th, we have Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and this is sci-fi. The planet of Kiln is where the tyrannical mandate keeps its prison colony, and for inmates the journey there is always a one-way trip. One such prisoner is a xenoecologist and political dissident. Soon after arrival, he discovers that Kiln has a secret. Humanity is not the first intelligent life to set foot there. In the midst of a ravenous, chaotic ecosystem are the ruins of a civilization. But who were the vanished builders, and where did they go? If he can survive both the harsh rule of the camp commandment and the alien horrors of the world around him, then Arton has a chance at making a discovery that might just transform not only Kiln, but distant Earth as well. Then there are 5 in April that I'm excited about. The first one is one of my most anticipated releases, and that's going to be on April 9th, and that's Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes, and this is sci-fi horror. Psychologist Dr. Ophelia Bray joins a small space exploration crew intending to monitor them for signs of ERS, a space-based condition known for a case that resulted in the brutal murders of 29 people. The crew doesn't trust Ophelia, and she doesn't trust them. I am so excited for this. I just read Dead Silence in November. That will be in my November wrap-up, linked below if you didn't see it. I love that book. I love sci-fi. I love horror. I love the blending of the two genres, and I cannot wait to read this one. Next up on April 9th is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and this is historical fantasy with some magical realism. And this is set during the Spanish Golden Age. And in this we have Lucia, who uses scraps of magic to get through her days of endless toil as a scullion. Scullion? I think that's how you would say it. But when her scheming mistress discovers her using this magic, she demands that she uses those gifts to better the family's societal position. What begins as simple amusement takes a perilous turn when she garners the notice of Antonio Perez, the disgraced secretary to Spain's king. And still reeling from the defeat of his armada, the king is desperate for any advantage in the war, and he'll step at nothing to gain the king's favor. Determined to seize this one chance to better her fortunes, she plunges into a world of seers and alchemists, holy men and hucksters, where the line between magic, science, and fraud is never certain. As her notoriety grows, so does the danger that her Jewish blood will doom her to the Inquisition's wrath. She will have to use every bit of her wit and will to survive, even if that means that she must enlist the help of an embittered immortal familiar whose own secrets could prove deadly for them both. I have read a few of Leigh Bardugo's books. I've read the whole Shadow and Bone trilogy, so that's Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and Ruin and Rising. And I've also read 6 of Crows, but this one definitely looks interesting and I will be keeping it on my radar. Oh, and I don't have a review of the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but I do have a review of 6 of Crows, and that was in my May wrap-up. I'll have that linked below. April 16th, we have Withered by A.G.A. Wilmot, and this is a horror ghost story. This is a queer paranormal psychological horror novel that shows the complex real-life terror inherent in grief and mental illness. After the tragic death of their father and surviving a life-threatening eating disorder, 18-year-old Ellis moves with their mother to the small town of Blackstone, seeking a simpler life and some space to recover. But Blackstone feels off. It's a disquieting place, one that's surrounded by towns with some of the highest death rates in the country. And it doesn't help that everyone says Ellis's new house is haunted. And you know I love a good haunted house story, so I'll definitely be keeping this on my radar. Then on April 23rd, we have Ocean's Gadori by Elaine Yu Cho. And this is sci-fi. That cover is stunning. I love it so much. And in this one, we follow Ocean, who is a Korean, and she comes from a long line of female divers. She's also considered persona non grata at the Alliance, the Korea's solar system dominating space agency, because a mission went awry and they think she's a little too quick with her gun. Then her best friend is framed for murdering his family, and Ocean and her misfit crewmates are pushed to the forefront of a high-stakes ideological conflict. But dodging bullets and winning space chases may be the easiest part of what comes next. A thrilling adventure across the solar that delivers hyperkinetic action sequences and irresistible will they won't they romance, not too thrilled about that, but we'll see, alongside its nuanced exploration of colonialism and capitalism. Okay, I don't know about that. You're gonna, criticize capitalism when it gives us everything that we have? I mean, maybe it's not the best, but it's the best compared to all the other alternatives. Anyway, won't go on a tangent about that. But Ocean's Gadori ultimately asks, what do we owe our past? How do we navigate our present while honoring the complicated facets of our identity? What can our future hold? Okay, last one in April, being released on April 30th, and that is Oracle by Thomas Old Huvelt, and that is a horror supernatural thriller. On a foggy winter morning, Luca Wolf and Emma Reich discover an 18th century sailing ship stranded on a barren flower field, its name written on the side, Oracle. Emma, unable to resist, enters the hatch on the tilted deck. The ship's bell begins to toll and no one sees her again. And then I just have one for May, and that's on May 14th, and that is The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry, and this is a gothic horror. In this, we follow a horror film fan who lands the job of cleaning a mansion of a horror film director. And his mansion is filled with props from his movies and awards as well. And he requires discretion, and so she's supposed to not say anything, and then she starts hearing noises behind a locked door. And they're noises that sound like a human calling for help, but she can't really do anything about it or ask questions or say anything. But soon she finds that the house has secrets she can no longer ignore. And then there are 5 releasing in June that I'm excited about. My birthday is also in June, so I feel like a couple of these are just for me for my birthday. The first one is one of my most anticipated releases on June 4th. That is Tidal Creatures by Shannon McGuire, and this is the 3rd book in the Alchemical Journeys trilogy. I have read Middle Game, and I do have Seasonal Fears. However, I've not read it yet. But I will be reading that soon, maybe early next year, obviously before I read this one. And in this one, we have Gods of Knowledge and Wisdom, Gods of Tide and Longevity. Over time, some of these moon gods incarnated into the human world alongside the other manifest natural concepts. Their job is to cross the sky above the impossible city, the heart of all creation, to keep it connected to reality, and someone is killing them. And this next one looks really good. It's releasing on June 11th, and that is Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. This is a horror. And this is a chilling take on the cursed film trope. In June 1993, a group of young guerrilla filmmakers spent 4 weeks making Horror Movie, a notorious, disturbing art house horror flick. However, only 3 of the film's scenes were ever released to the public, but it nevertheless grew a rabid fan base. 3 decades later, Hollywood is pushing for a big-budget reboot. And the man who played the Thin Kid is the only surviving cast member, and he remembers all too well the secrets buried within the original screenplay, the bizarre events of the filming, and the dangerous cross lines on the set that resulted in tragedy. As memories flood back in, the boundaries between reality and film, past and present, start to blur. But he's going to help remake the film, even if it means navigating a world of cynical producers, egomaniacal directors, and surreal fan conventions. Demons of the past be damned. But at what cost? Horror film is an obsessive, psychologically chilling, and suspenseful twist on the cursed film that breathlessly builds to an unforgettable, mind-bending conclusion. This kind of gives me night film vibes as well, so I'm very excited to read this one. Oh yes, and I have read one book by Paul Tremblay so far. I read Head Full of Ghosts. I read that in August, so that will be in my August wrap-up linked below. And next up, there are 3 releases that I'm excited for on June 18th. That's the day after my birthday, so that's a great birthday present to me. The first one is How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive by Craig DeLuey, and this is a supernatural horror story. This is a darkly humorous horror novel that sees a famous 80s slasher director set out to shoot the most terrifying horror movie ever made using an occult camera that might be and probably is demonic. Horror isn't horror unless it's real. So we have a cursed camera aspect as well as the final girl trope. So this looks really fun. I can't wait to read it. I did read episode 13. I think I read that in July. I will go ahead and link the wrap up for that below if you missed it. So yes, loved episode 13 and I really hope I'm going to love this one too. Next up on June 18th, we have Craft Stories I Wrote for the Devil by Ananda Lima, and this is surreal fiction. At a Halloween party in 1999, a writer slept with the devil. She sees him again and again throughout her life, and she writes stories for him about things that are both impossible and true. The next one releasing on June 18th that I am really excited for is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, and this is a thriller. I really hope it comes out with Book of the Month, that way it can match my other editions of his books that I have. In this one, we have a man, yes, so we have a male lead character, which is going to be his first book without a female lead character, so I'm really interested to read this. So in this, we have a man who must contend with the long ago disappearance of his childhood best friend and the dark secrets lurking just beyond the safe confines of his picture-perfect neighborhood. The other books that I've read by Riley Sager were Lock Every Door, The Last Time I Lied, and Home Before Dark, and I loved all of them, so hopefully I will like this one too. Then we have a few releasing in July. The first one on July 4th is The Ashfire King by Chelsea Abdullah, and this is book number 2 in the Sandsea trilogy. The first one was The Stardust Thief, which I did read in August. I'll have the wrap-up linked below in case you missed it. And in this one, after fleeing a patricidal prince, legendary merchant Luli al-Nazari, and banished prince Mazen bin Malik find themselves in the realm of Jinn with the mercurial Jinn of the lamp, but instead of sanctuary, they find a world on the cusp of collapse. I really enjoyed The Stardust Thief. It is an adventure fantasy, like a quest story, and it was inspired by 1001 Nights, and I do have the book, although I've never read it, but I really did enjoy The Stardust Thief, so hopefully this is a fun one as well. The next one, releasing on July 4th, is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And that is a folk horror suspense psychological thriller. In 1970, at a home for unwed mothers in Florida, this book follows 5 pregnant teenage girls as they wait out the last few months of their pregnancy. And they're in seclusion and they plan to give their babies out for adoption. Then some things go down there at the house. They believe that the house is haunted. However, it turns out that it's actually really this one girl that it all centers around. And then all the other girls decide to change their minds and they don't want to give their babies up for adoption anymore. Then there's this war between the girls and their social workers because they changed their mind about giving the babies out for adoption. And then the one girl at the center of all this haunted type of activity, the father of the baby comes by and he starts causing all sorts of trouble. And he causes a sort of trouble that people don't survive, so that sounds pretty intense. I have read a few by Grady Hendrix. I read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and I also read My Best Friend's Exorcism. And I just read Horror Store in September. That's the only book of his that I have a review for, so I'll link my review for that down below. And last one coming out in July on the 23rd is In the Lonely Hours by Shannon Morgan, and this is a gothic supernatural horror. On a small island in a remote corner of northwest Scotland lies Mondrel Castle, owned by its wealthy namesake family for centuries, until now. Edwina Nunn is shocked to learn a relative she has never heard of has bequeathed the castle and its land to her. So it sounds like there may be some kind of catch to living there. And it sounds like it's going to be atmospheric and spooky, so I'm looking forward to reading that one. And the last book on the list for my anticipated releases for 2024, A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. And this is actually a retelling of a Brothers Grimm story, Goose Girl. I haven't read that one, but it's like a fairy tale horror, which T. Kingfisher is pretty well known for. And in this one, it's a dark retelling of Brothers Grimm Goose Girl. It's rife with secrets, murder, and forbidden magic. Cordelia knows her mother is ... unusual. Okay friends, that will wrap it up for my 35 anticipated releases for 2024. Are any of these now on your list? Were they before? If you have any of the books not on this list, please let me know. I would love to hear. You know, there's always more room on a TBR. Okay, thank you so much for watching and joining me on my 12 Days of Christmas, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.